European Union, India Economic Compact trade agreement that carries a different scale of consequence. It is often described as the mother of all deals, a phrase that you must have also heard multiple times during the past couple of weeks, not because of tariffs alone, but because of the opportunity that this trade deal presents. And of course, it defines sustainability compliance, environmental benchmarks, and of course, the collaboration that's going to be there between both the geographies, Europe and India. Of course, the deal is coming in at a time of great geopolitical churn. This agreement is for around 2 billion people, nearly 1/4 of the global GDP, and which is why they rightly say it's the mother of all deals. In fact, let me welcome on stage to discuss and how global trading arrangements are going to move on from this point onward. May I please request Dr. Honorable Jyoti Jeetan, Minister of Financial Services and Economic Planning, Republic of Mauritius, to kindly come up on stage. And Dr. Piotr Antoni Switalski, the Ambassador of Poland to India. And I will be moderating this very session. So thank you very much for being with us here, Dr. Jeetan and Dr. Piotr. Since this is the final session of the day, we have to make the most of it, and would request for your feedback on, in case that you want to add anything, something that we've not really covered through the course of the day. So let me begin by asking you, ma'am. This is an era of great geopolitical and geoeconomic churn, and of course, countries are not really depending on multilateral institutions, but they're depending on bilateral deals, on one-on-one engagements with countries that are like-minded, that are not competitive. At least that's how India is looking at some of these deals. What do you really make of, the global trading order, and where is it headed, and Mauritius's approach to that?
Very interesting question. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for staying for the last session. What do we make of these deals? I mean, of course, I'm not going to repeat what almost every speaker has said about the changing world scenario, the end of the the fading away of the rule-based system, and the bilateral evolution happening in the world. And I think what is important to retain is the changing dynamics of the global South. And I think it is important, perhaps we don't talk enough of Africa, and where I come from, Mauritius, small island. In the old days, we were the star and the key of the Indian Ocean because of the spice route. But we are an interesting country in the sense that we are historically and culturally very linked to India. Almost 70% of our population originally come from India, but we are an African country. We are part of the African Union. We are part of COMESA, we are part of SADC. And why I'm saying this, some of you might know, 2 years ago, I think India welcomed the G20 summit. And one of the amazing things that happened during that session was that the African Union, that India pushed for African Union to have a permanent seat on G20. And that's the global South. When we talk of global South, we have to remember that Africa plays a big part in the global South. And Africa is a huge market. That's 1.4 billion people. That's a young population. That's a population that is bound to grow to 3 billion in the next, by the end of the century. And perhaps more importantly, someone said that yesterday, that's, 15 out of the 25 fastest growing economies last year came from Africa. So we need to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. So it's a great integration opportunity and possibility that you're talking about, ma'am. Let me come to you, sir. Let's talk about the EU-India trade deal. It's been called as the mother of all deals. In fact, Ursula von der Leyen has called India as a great stabilizer amidst all the geopolitical disruptions that we're seeing. So while we may talk about how tariffs on both the sides have been brought down by over 90%, in fact, zero duty access in so many other sectors as well. But what message does it really send out to the rest of the world? And has it been a great stabilizer, at least for Europe?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. On the FTA agreement between the European Union and India, it is not the most ambitious and the most comprehensive of free trade agreements concluded by the European Union recently. Yet, we call it groundbreaking, we call it watershed agreement, we call it game changer. Why? Very simple reason. In these turbulent times, we attach to it big importance. We believe that it can be the beginning of something good, a strategic partnership between India and the European Union, strategic partnership which would transform into a kind of Indo-European compact. Now, my three or four, let's say four messages about this agreement to the local audience, to you, to our Indian friends, and our European friends who are still in this room. Message number one, this agreement should be put on a fast track in terms of ratification and implementation. Waiting 1 or 1.5 years for the entry into force is definitely too much. But of course, some people say that EU fast track is an oxymoron. It takes time to do things in Brussels. But I believe, and that's also the view of Poland, we should do everything in our power to make the entry into force as speedy as possible. Message number two, this agreement, in order to bring results, should be translated into bilateral relations between India and individual countries, because trade and investment comes through bilateral channels. And the first message was addressed to our EU officials, EU member states, the second one to India. European partners need strong signals from both sides that they are welcome here. I can develop on it more. The third message is that other aspects of our agenda should use this momentum to be upgraded, to be elevated. What comes in mind as a priority? Connectivity, IMEC. The Polish position, IMEC should be upgraded from the institutional and other aspects and extended to the north. And the fourth aspect, the one that you asked at the beginning, this partnership between India and the European Union should send strong signal to the outside world, to the rest of the world. Together, we are 25% of the world population. And when we talk about the crisis of institutions, UN, other institutions, we could use this agreement to work out something, a vision, a common vision, how to improve things in economy, in politics, and in other aspects of life. So these are my four messages using the FTA agreement as the starting point.
Right, and we do hope that this is implemented as soon as possible. But before that, it has to be ratified by the Parliament, the European Parliament, and that is something that we'll be waiting and of course watching out for. We do hope that it doesn't really take as much time, given the fact that negotiations between India and the EU have gone on for nearly over 2 decades. Ma'am, let me come to you on that point, since we're talking about tariffs, since we're talking about trade resilience by forging bilateral partnerships, and that's something that countries across the world are doing. The EU, in that sense as well, has been forging its own relationships. But when you talk about the US, when you bring US into the picture, it's been slapping tariffs on countries left, right, and center. And even though some countries may have deals with the United States, but is that some sort of a surety that any other kind of disruption is not going to come in from President Donald Trump? Because that is not something that we saw in case of Greenland.
Sorry, say that again.
Right. We did not really see that happen in case of Greenland, right? I mean, he's been trying to annex, and whosoever opposes his moves will be strapped with tariffs. So even if you strike deals with the US, can that be considered a surety that there won't be any disruption, at least from the side of the United States?
I think I would probably avoid commenting on Greenland or anything like that. What I can say, certainly, as a government minister, I would avoid that. What I can say certainly is that we should not look at bilaterals as being merely bilaterals. And let me give you a very concrete examples. Mauritius had trade agreements with the EU. We have very close relationship with the EU. And at some point, we have established textile industry, very, very powerful, strong textile industry. But who started that? It's the guys from Hong Kong. So to tell you that, even when you have bilateral, there are ways and means of bringing along other countries. And this is where I am coming back to the African and the Mauritian story, is that even when you have India and EU, or India and US, trade agreements. In July this year, we are having the biggest US-Africa summit in Mauritius. We are bringing, 3,000 US investors who are going to be in Africa, coming to Mauritius. So there are ways and means of attracting investors who don't necessarily come from these two blocks, who are from other blocks, and who can, so there's a way of incorporating them.
Right. Let me ask you a follow-up question on that. And how can Mauritius really help connect Indian businesses more effectively with African markets under the evolving trade frameworks?
See, one of the, Mauritius is part of African Union, as I said, and we are part of the African Free Continental Trade Agreement. That's 54 countries that have signed that, for free trade for goods and services. And using Mauritius as a platform, as a hub to enter, so let's say Indian companies wanting to invest in Africa or wanting to use that as a hub can easily set up base. And why you want to do that in Mauritius? Because of, having a trade agreement is one thing, access is one thing, but what is more important is trust. Can you have trust in setting up base in those countries? And Mauritius provides that trust in terms of long-term strategic, partnership, in terms of free democratic system, in terms of stability, in terms of political stability, and free, repatriation of capital, etc. And that's why we have, over the last 3 decades, been, for example, one of the largest FDI drivers to India.
Right, ma'am. So let me ask you a question about, sort of the kind of convergences that this trade agreement is going to create for Europe. What's your perspective on that, on the market opportunity, the market size, the market access that you're getting? And what do you hope to achieve 5 years down the line if this FTA gets implemented?
First of all, I wanted to say that the image of India in Europe, in particular in Poland, is very positive. India is seen as a land of opportunity. India is seen as a friendly and a priority partner. On my desk, I have letters from Polish companies ready to invest in India billions of euros. And we are not a big economy. We don't have big companies. But they see India as a very fertile ground for economic activities. And we invite Indian companies, particularly in Poland, because Poland is a good starting point, like Mauritius for Africa, Poland for the rest of Europe. And many Indian companies, big companies, are established in Poland in order to then use the springboard to work with Germany, France, and so on and so forth. But about the advantages of free trade and such agreements. 20 years ago, Poland, a mid-sized country, entered the European Union. European Union is a territory without borders, with totally free trade, free movement of goods, people, and everything. The first impact was whole branches of our industry went bankrupt. They were not competitive. Our unemployment rate was close to 20%. 20 years later, we are now the 20th largest economy of the world. We are $1 trillion economy. We call present time golden age of Poland. Without the European Union, without these opportunities, without these open borders, it wouldn't happen. Of course, I don't want to advocate that Poland can be a model for other countries because, of course, we cannot be doctrinal. We cannot be scholastic about the advantages of free trade. We have to take into account different social and economic parameters. But nevertheless, why Poland is happy about this agreement with India? Because we see a lot of opportunities, and I like, in the context of other agreements, Mercosur in particular, if you know what I mean, this agreement poses no danger from the point of view of our business and also our politicians. That's why we encourage both sides, Brussels and Delhi, full speed, go ahead.
Absolutely, and that is something that we are also looking forward to. But Ambassador, let me ask you a follow-up question. In this era of fragmentation, what practical cooperation models should nations pursue? And 2 years down the line, given the kind of disruptions that we're seeing in trade, in supply chains, how will the world look?
Look, I'm not an economist, but my personal perception of the things is that we should not be pessimistic about the future of the world. I consider the current turbulences transitional. I believe that the world should be based on cooperation rather than rivalry. It is true that there are forces in the world who stick to the traditional concept of power. And here, in this room, one of the previous panels, it was all about power. Obsession of power, that the only instrument to prosperity, security, and well-being is power. I don't believe in it. I understand that it's history behind it, our traditional mindsets, but I believe the world of the future is the world based on cooperation. I reject the concept that even in economy, like you say, supply chains and everything, no, it's a zero-sum game. The problem, as you know, that there are some very strong political actors who use economy to gain some political advantage. They weaponize economy, they weaponize trade, and so on and so forth. But I hope very much that if we take the EU-India deal as a good example, we can say there is an alternative. Let's work rather through this path, despite all the difficulties that we face now. So I'm an optimist, and I think that the summit should end up on an optimistic note, guys. By the way, before we conclude, if you want, I can sell you a spoiler. And I know the plot of the movie that Mr. Bachchan is doing now, The King.
All right, guys.
You know why?
We are talking backstage, sir, about that. All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Piotr and Dr. Jyoti, for taking the time out and speaking to us here at the ET Now Global Business Summit. It's been an absolute honor to host you, to speak with you about the kind of changes that the world is going through, the kind of trends that we could be anticipating. Thank you very much.
So let me tell you
Yes.
what links Mr. Bachchan with me.
Tell.
King, the shooting of the movie started
That's
in
important.
Wrocław, Poland. Why? I suspect because the grandfather of your guest is a revered person in Poland. Not the father, but the grandfather. He was a famous poet.
Yes.
He has a statue in Wrocław, where they were shooting the movie, erected to his memory. Can you imagine how friendly Indians
Yes,
are received
absolutely,
in
and that
Poland?
really-
Shocking, huh?
Absolutely, that really talks about, how deep our ties are and, how far back they actually go, that you're talking of his grandfather.
Yes. So I know the plot of the movie because my dream was to be to play as an extra in one of the.
So are you getting to do that?
Okay. Sorry. I think that we should be serious.
Yeah, absolutely. But what a fun note to
Okay.
end this conversation on, Ambassador Piotr. Dr. Jyoti, thank you very much once again for being with us here at the Global Business Summit.
Thank you.